The Da Vinci Code explained the murder, the bloodline, the betrayal, and the secret beneath the Louvre. The mystery that made the world question everything. Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code is one of the most explosive popular thrillers of the 21st century, a 2003 mystery novel that turned art history, Christianity, cryptography, and conspiracy into a global publishing phenomenon. Dan Brown's official site describes him as the author of multiple #1 best-selling novels, including the Da Vinci Code, and says his novels are published in 56 languages with more than 250 million copies in print. The book's power is simple. It takes the most familiar images in Western culture, the Louvre, Leonardo da Vinci, the Last Supper, the Holy Grail, the Church, and asks whether their meaning has been deliberately misread for centuries. Britannica summarizes the novel as a Robert Langdon thriller built around art history, Christian origins, arcane theories, Opus Dei, the Priory of Sion, and hidden messages in Leonardo's work. That is why the novel became both a bestseller and a provocation. It was not only a murder mystery. It was a story about power hiding inside culture, about symbols hiding in plain sight, and about the possibility that the version of history most people inherit may not be the full version at all. The Guardian reported in 2005 that the novel had sparked religious controversy, especially around its claims about Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and church history. The big idea of the book. The big idea is that history is not only preserved by evidence, it is preserved by winners. The novel asks what would happen if the central symbol of Western Christianity had been misunderstood, if the Holy Grail was not a cup but a person, and if the Church's authority depended on suppressing a bloodline rather than protecting a doctrine. Underneath the puzzles, the book is driven by one emotional question. What if the truth about your family, your faith, and your civilization had been hidden from you because powerful people decided you could not survive it? The plot in one flow. The novel opens at night inside the Louvre Museum in Paris. Jacques Saunier, the museum's elderly curator, is being hunted through the galleries by a pale, violent monk named Silas. Silas is not killing for money. He is killing because he believes he is serving God. He belongs to Opus Dei, a strict Catholic organization, and he is acting under the instructions of a mysterious figure known only as the Teacher. The Teacher has convinced Silas and his religious superior, Bishop Aringarosa, that they are on the brink of recovering something sacred, the Holy Grail. Saunier is the last guardian standing between Silas and the secret. Silas demands the location of the keystone, a device that supposedly points the way to the Grail. Saunier lies to him, giving false information that has already been given by 3 other murdered guardians. Silas shoots him and leaves him dying. But Saunier does not simply die. In his final minutes, he turns his own death into a message. He strips naked, arranges his body in a symbolic pose, draws a pentacle on himself in blood, and writes a series of cryptic clues. He also leaves a message that directly names Robert Langdon, a Harvard professor of symbology who happens to be in Paris for a lecture. Langdon is woken in his hotel room by French police. He is taken to the Louvre by Captain Bézu Fache, a stern investigator who appears to want Langdon's help interpreting the symbols around the body. Langdon believes he is being treated as an expert witness. In reality, Fache suspects him of murder. This is the first reversal. Langdon thinks he has been invited into the case. He has actually been placed inside a trap. The reason is Saunier's final message. Part of it seems to accuse Langdon. Fache believes Saunier used his dying strength to identify his killer. He has secretly planted a tracking device on Langdon and is waiting for him to incriminate himself. Then, Sophie Nevieux arrives. Sophie is a French police cryptologist. She is also Saunier's estranged granddaughter. She instantly understands something Fache does not. Her grandfather's message is not an accusation. It is a warning. Sophie secretly alerts Langdon that he is being watched and helps him escape from the police inside the Louvre. She does this because Saunier's message contains a private clue only she would understand. It points to her childhood nickname and tells her to find Langdon. The murder investigation now becomes a chase. Langdon and Sophie are fugitives. The police think Langdon killed Saunier. Silas is still hunting the Grail. The teacher is manipulating events from the shadows. Sophie is trying to understand why her grandfather used his final moments to pull her into a mystery he had spent years hiding from her. Inside the Louvre, Langdon and Sophie begin decoding Saunier's clues. They realize his death pose echoes Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. The pentacle, which many people associate with evil, is explained as an ancient symbol linked to femininity, nature, and sacred balance. The message is full of misdirection. It is meant to confuse the police, but guide Sophie and Langdon. I one do wolf them. That is warmer. Another sends them to the Madonna of the Rocks. The trail reveals that Saunier was not merely a curator. He was part of a secret brotherhood connected to the Priory of Sion, an ancient organization dedicated to protecting the Holy Grail. The key physical object they recover is a strange item hidden behind a painting, a cryptex. The cryptex is one of the novel's best inventions. It is a cylindrical puzzle box, supposedly inspired by Leonardo da Vinci. To open it, one must rotate lettered dials to spell the correct password. Inside is a glass vial of vinegar wrapped around a hidden message. If someone breaks the cryptex open by force, the vial shatters and destroys the message. This turns knowledge into a test of intelligence, rather than violence. The secret cannot be beaten out of the object. It must be understood. Sophie and Langdon flee to the Depository Bank of Zurich in Paris, following another clue Saunier left behind. There they discover that Saunier had a secret account. Sophie's childhood knowledge helps unlock access, and they retrieve a box containing the cryptex. The police close in again. The bank manager, André Vernet, first helps them escape because he recognizes the seriousness of Saunier's legacy. But once he realizes they are wanted fugitives and fears institutional consequences, he turns on them. He tries to reclaim the box. Langdon and Sophie escape again. The novel keeps tightening its pattern. Every safe place becomes unsafe. Every helper may become a threat, and every clue opens into a larger historical claim. Langdon decides they need someone who understands Grail lore better than anyone alive. He takes Sophie to the home of Sir Lee Teabing, a wealthy British historian and Grail obsessive living near Paris. Teabing is charming, theatrical, disabled, brilliant, and obsessive. He becomes the novel's great explainer. In his house, he lays out the central conspiracy. According to Teabing, the Holy Grail is not the chalice used at the Last Supper. It is Mary Magdalene herself. More specifically, it is her womb, her bloodline, and her role as the suppressed feminine partner of Jesus. The theory claims Jesus and Mary Magdalene were married, had descendants, and that the church later buried this truth because a married Jesus and a sacred feminine lineage would threaten male ecclesiastical authority. Teabing explains the idea through symbols, language, and art. He interprets the Last Supper not as a straightforward Christian scene, but as a hidden message. He argues that the figure traditionally identified as John is actually Mary Magdalene. He points to shapes, colors, positions, and absences. In the book's logic, Leonardo encoded the secret because he was connected to the priory. This is the section that made the novel famous and controversial. It takes religious art and turns it into a crime scene. It takes theology and turns it into a cover-up. It takes a painting millions recognize and claims they have never truly seen it. Sophie is shaken. Langdon is cautious, but engaged. Teabing is exhilarated. He has spent his life wanting the Grail revealed to the world. Then Silas attacks. Silas has followed the trail to Teabing's estate. He breaks in, still acting under the teacher's command. The confrontation turns violent, but Langdon, Sophie, and Teabing overpower him. Rather than hand everything to the police, they take Silas with them and flee in Teabing's private plane to England. At this point, the story shifts from Paris to Britain. The mystery broadens from museum symbols to medieval churches, Templar mythology, and British Grail legends. Meanwhile, Bishop Aringarosa is moving through his own crisis. He believes Opus Dei is under threat from the Vatican, and that recovering the Grail will save his organization's influence. He has trusted the teacher because the teacher seemed to offer a divine solution. But Aringarosa slowly realizes he may have been used. Silas is the tragedy inside the machinery. He is violent, but he is also manipulated. His past is full of abuse, imprisonment, and shame. Opus Dei gave him structure, meaning, and belonging. The teacher weaponizes that need. Silas believes pain can purify him, obedience can redeem him, and murder can become service if commanded by the right authority. The chase continues through London. The clues point to the Temple Church, associated with the Knights Templar. Langdon, Sophie, and Teabing believe the next answer may be hidden there. But the location turns into another trap. Silas and the teacher's influence remain close. The police are closing in. Trust becomes increasingly unstable. The key emotional conflict also deepens. Sophie is not only solving an intellectual puzzle, she is being forced to confront the mystery of her own life. Years earlier, she walked in on her grandfather participating in a secret ritual. The scene horrified her. She misunderstood what she had seen and cut him out of her life. Saunier tried to reconnect, but she never fully forgave him. Now, his death is pulling her back into the world he wanted to explain before it was too late. This gives the thriller its emotional spine. Sophie is not chasing the Grail as an abstract relic. She is chasing the truth about her grandfather, her family, and herself. Eventually, the group is led to Westminster Abbey and the tomb of Isaac Newton. The clue refers to a knight buried by a pope, and Langdon realizes the answer points to Newton, whose funeral was presided over in Westminster Abbey and whose intellectual legacy connects science, symbolism, and hidden order. The cryptex requires a password. The answer is Apple, linked to Newton's famous association with gravity. But before the mystery resolves, the novel reveals its central betrayal. Lee Teabing is the teacher. The man who seemed to be mentor, ally, and expert has been orchestrating the murders. He manipulated Silas and Aringarosa. He arranged the deaths of the Grail Guardians. He brought Langdon and Sophie into his orbit not because he wanted to help them, but because he needed them to solve what he could not solve alone. This reversal works because Teabing's motives are not random. He does not see himself as evil. He believes he is liberating truth. He believes the church has suppressed humanity's most important secret for centuries. He believes the Grail must be revealed publicly, no matter the cost. That makes him more dangerous than a simple villain. He is a fanatic of exposure. Silas kills for obedience. Teabing kills for revelation. Both believe murder can be justified by sacred purpose. Teabing holds Langdon and Sophie at gunpoint and demands that Langdon open the cryptex. Langdon appears cornered. The secret may be destroyed. Sophie may die. Teabing may win. Langdon then makes a calculated move. He throws the cryptex into the air. Teabing, desperate to save the secret, drops his weapon to catch it. He believes the message inside will be destroyed if the device hits the ground. But Langdon has already solved the password and removed the hidden document. The cryptex Teabing catches is empty. The police arrest Teabing. His grand crusade collapses into failure, not because he lacked knowledge, but because he lacked humility. He wanted truth, but only if he could control its unveiling. Silas's story ends in tragedy. After confusion, manipulation, and violence, he accidentally shoots Bishop Aringarosa, the very man he loves and reveres. Silas dies after being wounded, devastated by what he has done, and by the collapse of the certainty that guided him. Aringarosa survives and understands too late that both he and Silas were pawns. The murder mystery is solved, but the Grail mystery remains. Langdon and Sophie follow the remaining clues to Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland. Rosslyn has long been surrounded by legends of Templars, Freemasonry, and Grail mythology, and it became strongly associated with the public imagination around the Da Vinci Code after the novel and 2006 film adaptation. At Rosslyn, Sophie discovers the truth Saunier had protected. She is part of the Bloodline. Her family did not entirely die. In the car crash she believed had orphaned her. Her grandmother and brother survived and were hidden for their own safety. Sophie is a living descendant of Jesus and Mary Magdalene within the novel's mythology. Saunier was not merely protecting an object. He was protecting her. This changes the meaning of everything. The Grail is not only a secret buried in history, it is a living inheritance. Sophie has been searching for a relic, but the story turns inward. The truth is not simply under a church, inside a box, or encoded in a painting. It is carried in blood, memory, and identity. Langdon's role also shifts. He began as the accused scholar, then became the interpreter of symbols, then the protector of Sophie's search. By the end, he is no longer the person who owns the answer. He is the witness who helps Sophie reach it. The final movement returns to Paris. Langdon realizes the last clue points back to the Louvre. The Grail, or at least the resting place of Mary Magdalene, is symbolically beneath the inverted pyramid near the museum. The novel ends with Langdon kneeling in reverence. It is not a conventional victory. There is no public announcement that rewrites Christianity overnight. There is no global revelation broadcast to the world. The secret remains partly hidden. But Langdon understands. The ending is deliberately quiet after so much pursuit. The book begins with a dead body in the Louvre and ends with a living act of recognition beneath it. The secret is not conquered. It is honored. The main characters inside the plot. Robert Langdon is the intellectual hero. He is not a fighter, soldier, or detective in the conventional sense. His weapon is interpretation. He survives because he can read symbols under pressure. His weakness is that knowledge does not automatically create certainty. Throughout the novel, Langdon often understands signs before he understands people. He can decode a painting, a ritual, or a historical reference. But Sophie's pain and Teabing's fanaticism require a different kind of intelligence. Sophie Neveu is the emotional center. She begins as a cryptologist who has lost trust in her grandfather. Her journey is not just from ignorance to knowledge. It is from estrangement to inheritance. Jacques Saunier is dead for almost the entire story, but he controls its structure. His final act is the engine of the plot. He turns death into communication, guilt into protection, and the crime scene into a map for Sophie. Silas is the corrupted believer. He wants redemption and belonging, but his need makes him vulnerable to manipulation. His violence is horrific, yet the book frames him as a damaged instrument rather than the true architect of evil. Bishop Aringarosa wants to save Opus Dei's status and future. His fear makes him susceptible to the teacher's scheme. He is not the master villain. He is a man whose institutional anxiety blinds him. Lee Teabing is the great betrayer. He wants the truth revealed, but his desire for revelation becomes its own tyranny. He hates suppression, yet he is willing to kill, deceive, and control others to force his preferred version of truth into the world. The central conflict inside the plot. The external conflict is a race to find the Holy Grail before the wrong people destroy, expose, or exploit it. The deeper conflict is over who gets to control meaning. The church, in the novel's conspiracy framework, represents institutional control. The priory represents hidden preservation. Teabing represents reckless exposure. Langdon represents interpretation. Sophie represents lived inheritance. That is why the book works as a thriller. Every clue is also an argument. Every location is also a battlefield between versions of history. The turning points inside the plot. The first major turning point is Saunier's death message. It transforms a murder into a symbolic quest. The second is Sophie's rescue of Langdon. It reveals that the police interpretation is wrong and that Saunier's message was meant for her. The third is the discovery of the cryptex. The mystery becomes physical, portable, and destructible. The fourth is Teabing's explanation of the Grail. The novel stops being a standard murder chase and becomes a historical religious conspiracy. The fifth is Teabing's betrayal. The trusted expert becomes the architect of the violence. The final turning point is Sophie's discovery at Rosslyn. The Grail is not only an object of history, it is connected to her body, bloodline, and identity. The emotional journey inside the plot. The emotional journey begins in confusion. A dead man leaves symbols around his body. Langdon is accused. Sophie is pulled back into a family wound. It becomes paranoia. Every institution seems compromised. The police are not safe. The bank is not safe. The church is not simple. Scholarship itself can be weaponized. It then becomes revelation. Sophie learns that the grandfather she rejected was protecting a truth too dangerous to explainly. Langdon learns that symbols are not dead academic material. They can govern lives, deaths, and entire civilizations. The ending becomes reverence. After all the running, decoding, and betrayal, the final note is silence. The truth is not shouted. It is recognized. The ending explained. The ending reveals that Sophie is a living descendant of the sacred bloodline protected by the Priory of Sion. Her grandmother and brother survived the family tragedy and were hidden to protect the line. Saunier had spent his life guarding not just a secret, but Sophie herself. Langdon's final realization brings him back to the Louvre, where he understands that Mary Magdalene's resting place is symbolically beneath the glass pyramids. He kneels, not because he has won a treasure, but because he has finally understood the shape of the mystery. The ending does not give the reader a clean public revolution. The church does not fall. The world does not suddenly change. The secret remains largely hidden. That is the point. Some truths are too powerful to become headlines. Some forms of knowledge demand reverence more than exposure. The story anchor. The strongest image in the novel is Saunier dying inside the Louvre and using his body as the first puzzle. It is grotesque, theatrical, and brilliant. A murder victim turns himself into a message. The body becomes a symbol. The museum becomes a map. The investigation begins not with evidence, but with interpretation. That single scene explains the whole book. In the Da Vinci Code, nothing important is only what it appears to be. If you only remember 3 ideas. The first idea is that symbols are never neutral. They carry the assumptions of the people who preserve, teach, and interpret them. The second idea is that suppressed history does not disappear. It returns through art, ritual, family memory, architecture, myth, and obsession. The third idea is that truth can be corrupted, both by concealment and by fanatic exposure. Teabing is dangerous, not because he hates truth, but because he loves it without restraint. The sentence that explains the entire book. The Da Vinci Code is a thriller about the terrifying possibility that civilization's most sacred truths may be hidden in plain sight, protected by the few, and misunderstood by the many. Why this book matters. The novel still matters because it understood something before the internet made it obvious. People are fascinated by the idea that official narratives are incomplete. Its historical claims have been heavily challenged by scholars and religious critics, and Britannica notes that many theologians and art scholars dismissed Brown's ideas, even as the book became hugely successful. But the book's cultural power was never based purely on whether every claim was accurate. It was based on the emotional appeal of secret knowledge. It gave readers the feeling that paintings, churches, and rituals might contain buried codes waiting for ordinary people to decode them. That feeling remains powerful in an age of online conspiracies, institutional distrust, and viral reinterpretations of history. Misconceptions. Most people treat the Da Vinci Code as either a dangerous attack on Christianity or a clever airport thriller. It is both more and less than that. It is less than a reliable historical guide. It should not be read as a clean substitute for scholarship. But it is more than a puzzle chase. It is a story about institutional power, suppressed femininity, symbolic literacy, and the human hunger to believe that reality has a hidden layer. The internet often reduces the novel to Jesus had a bloodline, or the church hid the truth. That misses the engine of the story. The real appeal is not just the claim. The chase. It is the sensation of moving from one symbol to another while ordinary reality falls apart. Book summary apps often flatten the novel into facts. Social media often turns it into a religious argument. But the novel works because it makes interpretation feel dangerous. The tailored interpretation. The tailored interpretation is this. The Da Vinci Code is really about the violence caused when people confuse truth with ownership. The church wants to own the story by suppressing the threat. Teabing wants to own the story by exposing it on his terms. Silas wants to belong to a story so badly that he surrenders his conscience. Sophie has the strongest claim to the truth, but she is the least interested in using it for power. That is the sharpest point in the book. The person most entitled to the secret is the person least corrupted by it. The real-life test. The real-life lesson is not to believe every hidden history theory. The useful lesson is to ask who benefits from the version of events you have inherited. In careers, that means reading the informal power structure, not just the org chart. In relationships, it means noticing what is avoided, not just what is said. In leadership, it means understanding that people protect narratives because narratives protect status. The book's practical warning is simple. When a story is defended too aggressively, it may be carrying more than truth. It may be carrying power. How to apply the lessons without turning them into a fantasy. Do not turn the novel into a license for paranoia. The grounded application is to separate curiosity from certainty. Investigate patterns. Check sources. Follow incentives. Notice who controls information. But do not mistake every gap for a conspiracy. The best real-world version of Langdon is not someone who believes everything is hidden. It is someone who can read carefully under pressure without losing discipline. 5 questions to test whether you actually understood this book. What does Saunier's death scene reveal before the reader understands the Grail mystery? Why does Sophie's personal history matter more than the public conspiracy? How does Teabing become a mirror image of the institutions he claims to oppose? Why is Silas tragic, even though he commits terrible violence? Why does the novel end in reverence rather than global revelation? The final lesson. The Da Vinci Code endures because it turns the world into a locked room. A painting is not just a painting. A church is not just a church. A body is not just evidence. A family secret is not just private grief. The book's final lesson is not that every official story is false. It is sharper than that. The stories that rule people are often protected by symbols they no longer know how to read.